We'll get started. Okay, my name is Diana Classy, and I'm a South Dakota Master Gardener. I was a Maryland Master Gardener for 10 years before I moved here. I'm also, had my private pesticide applicator's license in Maryland also, so I have a lot of information on chemical safety and integrated pest management. So we're going to cover those things. So we're going to start with integrated pest management. Then we'll go to some of the more common pests that you deal with here in Maryland. And then I'm going to cover a little bit about how, if you decide to use chemicals, how to use them safely. Okay, so we're going to start with integrated pest management. And you'll see a lot of our pictures of the pests here too. Okay, come on now, behave yourself. Oh, well, maybe it's not going to behave itself. She had it going. Let me see. Where'd she go? Oh, there we go. Okay, what is IPM, or integrated pest management? It's a decision-making process that uses monitoring your garden. So you need to be out in your garden to see what's going on. And it uses, and that way you can determine if you need to treat and how much you need to treat. And it uses multiple methods of control. Not, some people have told me, well, integrated pest management, you don't use chemicals, but yes, you do, but you use multiple. You go through what's least invasive to maybe using chemicals. Why do you want to use integrated pest management? It keeps your ecosystem balanced, because you're not, I have had friends that see one bug on their plant and they're out getting the chemicals. You don't want to do that. So this way you're monitoring what's going on. Sometimes pesticides can be ineffective, especially if the pest has developed a resistance to it. And we can talk a little bit about resistance too. It can save money, and it promotes a healthy environment. There's 5 steps to integrated pest management. The first one is you need to identify what your pest is. You really want to know if it's a Mexican bean beetle or is it just a ladybug. They look kind of similar. You want to make sure that you know whether it's an insect that's doing the damage, whether it's a disease. You know, you really need to figure out what the problem is. Then you monitor it, because sometimes they're not really doing a lot of damage and it's okay. So you might decide, you know, it's okay for right now. Maybe it's a few aphids and yeah, they're unsightly, but I can live with those. Or you might decide, no, the bean beetles are just skeletonizing my beans, they've got to go. And you develop what your goal is and how you're going to treat it. So your goal should never be to get rid of all the insects, because they're always going to outlive us. You just want to have the population to a level that is not going to do away with your plants that you're trying to grow. And then you implement the program. Whatever you've decided to do, you implement that. Then here's an important part. You go and you observe, how well did that process that you did, how well did it work? Or did it work at all? Or, and then you keep records so you know, well, that worked this time, I'll try it again next time. Or it didn't work, we've got to try something else. There's 4 main groups of pests. There's the bugs, the insects, the mites, the ticks, the spiders, the snails. Then there's diseases. They're also a pest. When someone says pesticide, what do you usually think of? You usually think of an insecticide, but a pesticide is not just an insecticide. So pests are not just insects, they're diseases, they're weeds, and then like one of my pictures had there, the birds, the rabbits, you know. I have a rabbit story for you. I had rabbit problems in my bean patch. And the crazy little rabbits were only eating the bottom half of the beans. They weren't just eating the whole bean, just the bottom half of a whole bunch. So my pest control that year was fish emulsion, because the rabbits didn't like the smell of fish emulsion. But a fish emulsion is a fertilizer, so the green beans loved it, and it worked until it rained. Then I had to put some more on. So there's a little bit of interesting integrated pest management. There's several methods. The first one is, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let be what be. And I had that mindset when I had a large garden, because I always planted more than what I knew I would need. So there would be some for the pests.
You're a nicer.
Yeah, well, I don't have that large garden anymore, so I don't do that. There's biological controls, mechanical controls, and we're going to cover some of these, cultural controls, chemical controls, of course, and then getting resistant plants. Biological controls, there's a picture of basically that going on right now. That is a tomato hornworm that a little tiny parasitic wasp has found to lay its eggs on, and the eggs, when they hatch, will basically eat that worm inside out. So if you find one of these in your tomato patch, don't kill it, move it to somewhere else, but let the little tiny parasitic wasp do its thing. And I had trouble convincing people to do that. I don't want that tomato hornworm on my tomato. Well, then move it somewhere else, but don't kill if it has little white things on it like that. Okay, so mechanical control would be like cultivating. The trapping, does anybody use beer traps to catch the slugs? You know, that's a mechanical control. Barriers such as, we'll talk about those two barriers, such as floating road covers or something like that. Cultural practices, mulching, fertilizing, irrigating, you know, anything that you would do to help your plant grow. You're controlling by mulching. Sometimes you're controlling, well, you're definitely controlling the water and the weeds. Let's see, and sanitation. Do you clean out your vegetable garden at the end of the season and get rid of, like, for example, I had some mite damage on my beans last year, so I got all that cleared out, and that did go to the dump. I didn't compost it. If you have signs of fungus on your tomatoes, you don't want to keep that around either. At the end of the year, you need to get that out of there. So cultural control is all about breaking up. This is called a disease triangle or a pest triangle. So you're trying to alter one of these things to control the problem. So you're altering the environment. And usually that would be, like I said, the mulching or putting a floating road cover over your plants or something like that. And I'll show you what I mean by floating road cover in a minute. Or you're changing the host plant. Maybe you're buying a plant that is disease resistant to something. You know, tomatoes have all kinds of different disease resistance that they've bred into their plants. Or you're doing something about the pest. Maybe you're affecting its life cycle or something. So then once you got all that determined, you want to implement your program. But before you implement your program, you want to basically review what we just talked about. You want to make sure you know what the pest is. You want to see what kind of, you want to monitor it and see what's going on and how bad it's hurting the plants or how much damage you can tolerate. And that's the next one. When it gets bad enough, you need to know, okay, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I need to take action. Know what controls are available. And then at the end, you want to be able to evaluate, well, even before that, you want to look at the controls you're looking at and determine which ones have the best benefits for the least amount of risk. And that includes when you're thinking chemicals. You select the method that's most effective and least harmful to start with. And there's several different methods you can try, and you want to work your way down the schedule, down the ladder before you decide, or up the ladder maybe, before you decide to get out the big guns and get your chemicals out. And you need to keep a record, write down what works, what doesn't work. Okay, here's an example of integrated pest management with spider mites. Do you see that bean plant? That's what my beans looked like last year. And I didn't take action quick enough, so they really did my bean patch in totally. But the first thing you want to do is you go out, like I said, you want to be out in your garden a lot. You need to observe the stippling on the leaves. That's a sign of spider mites. But you want to confirm that it's spider mites, because it could be something else. And the easiest way that I know of to confirm spider mites is you take a white piece of paper and you hold it under a leaf and shake the leaf. Then you look at the paper and you should see salt and pepper running around on your paper if it's spider mites. They're not always going to be black. They might be a lighter color. Then I get out my blaster. I got this for my roses, but it works good on the beans too. You hose up onto this, and this puts out a pretty straight stream of water, and you blast that. Now, granted, you're going to lose some of your leaves too, especially if some of them have been damaged enough by your spider mites. But you want to do that. Do that every 3 days for a couple of weeks, and then you want to wait a couple of days and do your paper test again. Did that control your spider mites? If it did, your leaves aren't going to heal themselves, but the new leaves coming out should be clear of spider mites. Now, the other thing you have to know about spider mites is if you use too many insecticides too often, you're going to be killing the beneficials that keep spider mites under control. So you want to be careful when you're getting out your 7-Dust or something like that, because you could be killing the beneficials that keep spider mites under control. And insecticide doesn't kill spider mites.
I was just going to say, with beans, I have better luck with pole beans than bush beans. They very seldom get the.
Yep. We're gonna grow pole beans this year. Yep, exactly.
They just eat my bush beans down to the ground sometimes.
Yeah, they did mine last year. So then you observe your results and determine if that works. Then you want to make a record of that. Okay, we're going to switch to another one if I can, because we're finished this, but I want to go to the actual pests. Here we go. Okay. So I'm trying to do these in the order of when you might see them. Dampening off is a fungus that lives in the soil or near the top of the soil. And if you start your seedlings in the house, you might see this. Of course, you might see this out in the garden if we have a wet season after you've planted your plants. The best way to help prevent this is to keep good air circulation. If you were here at our last meeting, she had a fan blowing on her little seedlings. That's good air circulation. It will help with dampening off. I have not seen this here, but I did see it quite often in where I lived before in Maryland, because it was very humid. Cutworms. I hate these guys. You get your plants in and you go, yes, I've got that in. They're going to be great. And then you find out the cutworms were out there. What I do to prevent this, or to help prevent this, is I usually start my seeds in a little thing like this, and then I move them into styrofoam cups. Well, when I plant, then I just break the bottom off the styrofoam cups and shove the styrofoam cups in the ground around my little seedlings. And it helps with the cutworms, because they're going to be working pretty much at ground level. So you want to shove that cup down about 1 inch too. And it also kind of protects your little seedlings from the wind at first too. Have any of you suffered from cutworms? I know Marla said she does. Yep, those little
My
buggers.
uncle would take a piece of newspaper, make a strip, and he wrapped that around the stem when he planted his tomatoes. you know, part of the little strip was below the soil and part was
Mhm.
above the soil, and he did, that took care of the cutworms for him.
My
The
dad,
paper would disintegrate later, you know.
my dad had the weirdest thing. He would have us put nails around the thing, and, you know, like 4 nails, and I thought, how is this gonna help the cutworms?
They can't wrap around the shoes.
Yes,
Yeah.
no.
Seriously.
Aphids, now, once you get your plant going really good, then the aphids come along because they love that new green shoots. I used to joke with friends that probably if you went to a Mexican or Italian restaurant and you ate something that was really garlicky, you could breathe on the aphids and they'd probably fall off. But they're another one where you can use a blast of water to blast them off. I've also been angry enough that I just take my hands and I just rub them. But I'm not afraid of bug guts, so not everybody can do that.
Has anybody used wild garlic around their things? In Wisconsin, we used to put wild garlic around plants that had aphids, and it seemed to work as long as you could keep the wild stuff under.
Yeah.
I'd rather deal with that than that, because that seemed to take over big time. Just curious.
I've also read that something about marigolds and can repel aphids too. I'm not sure. I read that in one place, but you know, when you read things online, you can't believe everything. So, okay, I didn't start my. I'm sorry. I thought I had this on the. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Okay, blossom end rot is really not a pest. It's not caused by any disease or anything like that. It's more of a cultural problem. It's the plant uses calcium to form the outer part of the tomato or pepper or squash or whatever, and the calcium comes up from it is brought up from the ground. So the way to help with this is more consistent watering. Don't let your plant have dry periods in between or get too wet. Just consistent watering so that the plant is able to draw up the nutrients it needs.
I had an aunt that would plant dry milk with the plant, and she said she's never, ever had dry rot. But she also constantly waters, or consistent.
Consistently, yeah, it's probably more of that, but the dried milk isn't going to hurt it. So, yeah, I've heard of people using crushed eggshells too.
I do that. And I don't have it if I do.
Okay, now we're going to go over into the disease pests. Remember, pests aren't just insects, they're also the diseases. And there's 3 that we mostly see here in South Dakota, the late blight, and that's what it looks like on the leaves in the tomatoes. I can't pronounce this word. Come on, Marlis, you help me with this. Septoria leaf spot. I didn't get a real good picture about how it affects the fruit, but there's how it looks on the leaves. It kind of makes a circle and then the center part falls out. And early tomato blight. So to help prevent tomato diseases, try and grow some resistant varieties. Crop rotation, don't grow your tomatoes in the same place you did the year before. And I would be careful about growing them anywhere where you had one of the, what do they call that? The evening, anyway, nightshade plants, the peppers or the potatoes or anything like that. Water your soil, not your leaves. So when you water, try and don't do overhead watering because you want to keep the leaves as dry as possible. And you also, rain is going to happen, so it happens, but don't add to it. Try and water your soil. Provide good air circulation, and that's kind of hard if you have a small area because you want to get as many tomatoes per square inch, right? But fight that urge. Make sure you have good air circulation in between your tomato plants. And don't compost any diseased leaves or plants. And that kind of goes with powdery mildew. We have a problem with this when we have really wet winters. I don't think powdery mildew was really a problem last year because we just didn't get any moisture. Powdery mildew is most prevalent when you have temperatures, overnight temperatures that are in the 60s and daytime temperatures that are 80 or over. And that's pretty much our summer, isn't it? Okay, here's the tomato hornworm and the moth that lays the eggs for that guy. It doesn't start out that big. They start out really cute, about 1 inch long, but then they get to be like this big. So I don't have a problem hand picking and squishing, but if you do, you could probably hand pick this guy and drop him into a bucket of soapy water, or knock him into a bucket of soapy water. But if you see the ones with the egg cases, don't kill those. If you don't want it on your tomato plant, get it somewhere else, but let the parasitic wasp do its thing. Squash borers, I don't have anything magic for that. I've tried the slit and get the things out and then bury it with soil, and I've heard that works, but it hasn't ever worked for me. If this is one of those that if you know when the adult is out laying the eggs and you can wait to plant your squash later or have it protected until that time is over with. I know in Maryland, the Amish knew that something like the first part of July or the end of June was when it didn't lay anymore, and that's when they would put out their starts so that they wouldn't have a problem with the squash borer. Do you all have trouble with squash bugs here?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now you know what their egg cases look like and their different stages of nymphs. If you could see the egg cases, you want to get those scratched off the leaves as soon as possible and destroy those. And cucumber beetles, they're just so cute, but they're such a mess. These beetles can all, they don't do a whole, although I have seen them eat up a whole blossom. But other than that, their big danger is that they carry diseases. They carry mosaic virus, cucumber mosaic virus, and bacterial wilt. And cabbage worms. I have a friend that has a butterfly net that she keeps out in her garden, and whenever she sees those white little butterflies, she catches them and kills them. And I do that too, but the neighbor kids used to get on my case because why are you killing the white butterflies? And these are two of the cabbage worms. There's several others. I tried to look up which ones specifically are the ones that we have problems with, and I know we have problems with the white one, with the white butterflies. If you are growing things that are not needing to be pollinated, this is a good option. Floating row covers. Things like your cabbage family, they don't need to be pollinated. You can put these over there. Your spring things are really good because I'm not so sure how well these would do when the temperatures get really high. But as you can see, lettuce and I think that's kale. That, because I know those cabbage things love the kale as well. You can use them for the early part of your cucumbers and your squash. But once they start blooming, you've got to take that off so that the pollinators can get to them. I don't know, do you have problems with corn borers here? I know we did in Maryland. These are another one of those that probably early on, you could probably protect your vegetable with a floating row cover until they needed to start pollinating. Mexican bean beetles. I have no trouble squishing those little yellow things or rubbing the egg cases, and the big ones are really great to just pick and drop into soapy water or squish. I've been known to make leaf sandwiches with the larvae. You just put 2 leaves together. You know, especially if you don't want to touch that stuff, you know, just. Colorado bean beetles. Has anybody paid kids to pick these off your potatoes? Yeah, I think my dad paid us too. Once again, if you know what the eggs look like, you can catch them really quick. Once again, leaf sandwiches, just squish them. Okay, we've already gone over the spider mites, so I won't repeat this except to say don't delay. Last summer when I found the spider mites in my beans, I delayed like 2 days and it was too late. I should have gone out there right away with my water wand and get 2 of them. I didn't realize they were going to desecrate my beans as fast as they did. So if you see signs, you need to get right to that.
Do they climb back up though, once you?
Well, that's why you want to do it every 3 days for about 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you shoot them across the yard, it's going to take them a long time. Okay, there's my resources, and I wanted to get to the other, and we'll finish about the chemicals. Okay. Chemical controls. Pesticide, that word is very like homicide because it's designed to kill for the most part. It's designed to kill the fungus or the insect or the rodent or the mite. So keep that in mind, that this could be something that has some danger to it.
Is this, would you see it like this, or do you just,
Oh, the squash board?
what tells you that you have that?
The squash plant goes limp.
Okay.
It goes limp, and then if you look real close at the base of the plant, you're going to see something that almost looks like sawdust.
Okay.
And then if you split the stem open, and don't think if you find one that's all there is. I found like 5 or 6 in mine, and then supposedly you're supposed to be able to. And I know people have success. Have you had success where you bury the stem again, but you have to go up? You have to bury what came out, but you have to go up where the damage hasn't been done yet. Okay. I don't have room for squash right now, so I'm not growing squash. Common types of pesticides. You've got fungicides to control fungi. You've got insecticides. They all have that sides in there. Miticide. Now, don't be mistaken. A mite is not an insect. It's an arachnoid. So an insecticide is not going to kill a mite. And an herbicide. Now, herbicides and insecticides, you have to think of one thing in particular, and that is that most are not selective, meaning that if you spray them on something that get near something you don't want to get killed, it could get killed too. So when you spray an insecticide, it's not just going to go after your harmful insects. It's going to also hurt your beneficial insects. So keep that in mind. Just like herbicides won't just kill that dandelion, it could also kill something you don't want it to kill, your green beans or tomatoes or roses. And read the label 3 times. First, you want to read it before you buy it. If you read the label and the label has something on it that says something, it wants you to wear something when you use it, and you say, I'm not going to do that, don't buy it. The label has been put on there by the manufacturer, and they had to go through legal things to get it on there. So the label basically is the law. So if you don't plan on following the label, don't buy it. Once you get it home, before you store it, read it again, because now you can sit down and you can open the little flyer that's on it and all that kind of stuff and really read it thoroughly again. And then read it again every time you use it, even if you've already used it several times. Read it again to make sure it's clear in your head what you need, what you want. And I fixed that I at home, and I didn't have it here. I'd already sent this out, so it didn't help me to fix it. The label is the law. Okay, the label is going to tell you several things. It's going to tell you the brand name, which is 7. It's going to tell you the active ingredient, which is down here, and what percent of what's in here is the active ingredient. It's going to tell you what plants it can be used on. And there's a section here and a section here, and this is small fruit. It tells you where you can use it. If it's not on the label that you can use it on a plant, do not use it on that plant. So that's one of the reasons why you want to read the label before you even read it. I mean, even buy it. So you're going to the store and I want to get something that I can put on my eggplant. If the label doesn't say eggplant, you can't use it on your eggplant. You need to know, it'll tell you what pests you can use the product for. So in here it says insect pests and what you can use it for. So once again, if the label doesn't say you can use it for spider mites, don't buy it because you can't use it on spider mites. So you need to know what the label has to say. Tells you how much to use and how and when to apply it. I know that's all that's usually the first thing we look at, right? It tells you whether you need to use protective equipment or what to wear. This one, I had to look real hard for it, but it's on there. It tells you that you want to use chemical resistant gloves when you use it. It has signal words. Most of the chemicals you're going to find do not have danger. Regular household people don't use that. That's for people who are licensed. This one has a caution label, and it should be right on whatever you're going to buy. Warning is a step up over caution, and danger is the very next step. So whenever possible, use something that has caution on it over warning. Even household chemicals, if you look at some of those, they'll have caution on them too. It has precautionary statements defining the hazards. See right here, I know you can't see, but right in this section it says precautionary statement. It has emergency and first aid on it. What happens if you swallow it? What happens if you get it on your skin or clothing? And it has how to store it and how to dispose of it. Now, one thing that this also has, which I didn't put on my talk, is it also tells you if you use this, how many days you have to wait before you can harvest. That's important because we're talking vegetables that we're going to be eating. Okay, so let's talk about the risk you're taking when you use chemicals. The risk is equal to how toxic the product is and how much you're exposed to it. So toxicity is the ability to cause short-term or long-term injury. Exposure is how often you're exposed and how it can enter your body. Okay, how do the chemicals enter your body? Well, your skin is very absorbent, especially on hot days. Your eyes, there are some chemicals out there that are rated danger only because they can cause blindness, but I don't think there's any that you guys would use. Oral, splashing when you're mixing, licking your lips, do not chew gum, do not eat, and do not smoke when you're using any kind of chemicals, even if it's 7 dust. And inhalation. You really need to think about that anytime you're using a dust. Or even if you're, let's say you're mixing up some herbicide to use. When you're mixing it up, if you can smell the herbicide while you're mixing it, you're inhaling some of that chemical. So you need to be careful with that too. When I use something like that, I used to spray fungicide on my roses a lot. I lived in Maryland, the black spot capital of the world. And so if you didn't spray a fungicide, you didn't have any leaves on your roses. And I had a face mask that I wore because when I was mixing the chemicals, if I could smell the chemicals, I knew I was breathing it. So I had a face mask and I would not, one especially designed, and I would not smelled the chemicals, so I knew I wasn't breathing them. Let's talk about personal protective equipment. That's what you want to, this one, like I said, didn't have a specific spot, but most of them say a specific spot on what they want you to wear. It refers to how you protect yourself from the chemical. It reduces the exposure, but it doesn't necessarily totally eliminate it. And you are legally required to follow any personal protective equipment requirements that they tell you on the label. And I was one of those cautious pesticide users. I went for more than that. I took the picture out because I didn't want to scare you, but I would really dress up. Protect your skin at a minimum. Even on those really hot days, you should be wearing long sleeves, long pants, shoes, and socks. I used to have a friend that went out and she'd have shorts on, tank top, sandals, and she was spraying. And she'd have a face mask on, and I'm thinking, no. So you should at least long pants, long sleeves, shoes, and socks. Even if you're doing this, because you don't know where all it's going. Chemical resistant gloves. This does say they want you to wear gloves, chemical resistant gloves when you use it. Proper footwear. Don't wear sneakers, don't wear leather. Those both absorb the chemical. The best thing to wear is I went and bought some cheap rubber boots. And if you're spraying up, you want to have something, because your head, your scalp is very absorbent. You don't want the chemicals coming through your head. So if you're spraying up like you've got a tall something you're spraying, you want to make sure you have your head protected. And so I didn't have one of these. I just had, I just had my chemical clothes on. Okay. Final points, always read the label and follow it. Remember, it's the law. Keep chemicals in your original containers. I've seen people put them in other containers. Never put chemicals in something that used to have something that you would drink, because it's too easy to make a mistake there. If you put it in something unlabeled, you don't know. In 2 years, you might forget what you put in there. Store your pesticides in lock container cabinets. I have a big bin that's plastic, but it has a lock with a key. Because I don't have any small children around, but I used to have my grandchildren when they were little come around, and I didn't want them to get into those things. Even something like this. Do not spray when windy. Think about drift. This one is easy to see. You can see drift. If it's windy and you're spraying and it's going somewhere else, you can see that. I have seen numerous people in this area spray when it's really windy, and I'm thinking, what are they doing? Don't they see that? I have personally had a neighbor spray when it was windy, and tomatoes and roses are both very susceptible to herbicide, and I could see herbicide damage on my roses because they did spray when it was windy. The other thing, and this one's harder to see, don't spray if it's over 80 degrees because chemicals can volatilize. It's kind of like they evaporate in the air and then they go wherever they're going to go. And you might say, well, how much damage can that happen? I'm a rose person, so I have a lot of rose experience with. I had a client who had climbing roses near or right off his courtyard where he drove his cars in, and it was brick, and there were weeds that were growing up between the bricks. He sprayed them on a hot day. The next time I came to look at the roses, he said, what's wrong with my roses? And I said, okay, I looked around and I could see that some of the weeds in his courtyard weren't healthy looking. I said, did you spray an herbicide in here? He says, yeah. I said, so how hot was it when you sprayed that herbicide? Was it over 80 degrees? Oh yeah. I said, well, that's what happened. The herbicide you sprayed volatilized and it drifted onto your roses. Well, I didn't see any drift. And I said, you don't see that. So you need to keep that in mind. Even if you're just spraying an herbicide, I've also seen tomato plants near the golf course with herbicide damage. And you know that they've sprayed herbicide on a golf course. Whether it was hot or whether it was drift, I don't know. I could only see the after effect. For best results, when you spray for a disease or an insect pest, get the underside of the leaves as well as the top side, because they hide both diseases and pests and insects. Do not use restricted pesticides unless you have an applicator's license. You would only probably be able to get your hands on restricted chemicals if you got them online. So if you buy them from big box stores, they're not out there. So you won't have to worry about that. Or hardware stores or any of those. And keep a log. Even if it's just on your regular calendar, write down, okay, today I sprayed, I used 7 dust on my green beans. Write down what you did and when you did it. Because if something happens, you have a log as to when you did whatever it was you did. Okay, and I love this picture. Can you see why? There's a little tree frog in that, Rose. I thought he was a little bit of junk, and I went to dig out the junk, and I went, oh. So I said to my husband, come and get this picture. You gotta get this picture. It's so cute. Okay, any questions? Because Marla is going to help me answer any of the hard ones too.
I just have one. You said client. What was your past job or what are you referring to?
Okay, I worked for a landscaper 1 day a week. He hired me as his rose person. However, when I got done taking care of the roses for a couple of clients, then I helped the rest of the crew. So I really got an education about taking care of perennials and trimming bushes and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. The other 4 days of the week, I was a bookkeeper.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. Yes.
I have trouble with the asparagus beetle, and I know some say spray malathion. How often when?
You spray what?
Malathion.
Help. I'm not sure I would want to spray malathion on something I was going to eat.
The one thing that I learned is you can use a pied refriend, but cut every spear of asparagus off down to the ground and spray the ground.
You're spraying the ground
Okay.
because the insect lives in the ground then.
The insect lives in the ground and it comes up. And I have a lot of trouble with them too.
Yeah, I always cut it off at ground level.
It's pied refriend, P-Y-R-E-T-H-R-I-N.
That's made from a flower.
Yes, that is a natural.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although there is a chemical pyrethrin too that they've synthesized, but the natural one is what you want to use. Now, the one thing I didn't mention is people will say, well, I'm not going to use chemicals. I'm going to use organic pesticides. Some of the organic pesticides are as dangerous, if not more dangerous than the chemical ones. So just because you say, I'm going to use an organic pesticide, that doesn't mean it's going to be safe for you. So once again, read the label and follow what the label says.
Well, I've had these squash things with the plant just.
Yep, squash borers.
Okay, Marlis, I think, didn't you tell me one time putting sugar around the plant?
No.
Marlis told me that, but anyway,
Someone else may have told you that.
I didn't try that, but I mean, once the squash plant has started to grow, would it help to, somebody mentioned putting newspaper, would it help to put paper around the stem or something?
I don't know. I've tried tinfoil and things got in anyway.
Oh, well.
One thing that's supposed to help the squash bugs, that's those gray ones.
That's the stink bug things.
Yeah,
Mhm.
put a board down. You like to go under boards, and then you lift the board, and you can actually use a blowtorch and try the plant, and they'll select under that board overnight, and then have your blowtorch ready, and lift up the board and burn all.
Wow.
Ooh, sweet, man.
Hey, that's probably meaner than me squishing them.
Even dusting a little sediment on the plant before you see any damage with that.
Well, see, now you're trying to be preventive
Yeah.
and really 7 is a contact thing. It needs to,
Oh.
the insect needs to come in contact with it. It's not like some of the fungicides can be preventative where you would spray it and they form kind of a preventive layer on the plant so that the spores can't penetrate. But I would be cautious using an insecticide as a to prevent.
We have a master gardener who will cut down in the stem of a squash plant or pumpkin plant. Cut down in there, take out those little worms and
And then you bury it with soil.
well, she also puts diatomaceous earth on it.
Okay. Mhm.
And I'm sure she probably covers it with that, but she puts diatomaceous.
Yeah, I've tried a bunch of that. I don't think I buried it far enough up so that I got to the part,
Could
because,
you get to the stem and get to the actual worms?
oh yeah, you
No way
can,
in
you
the
can
world
cut them
she
open.
does.
But the whole problem with that is you don't know how far up they've gone. Because I've cut and I said, okay, I've pulled out 4, that's got to be all there is. And then buried it up and sure enough, there were more that had gone up the stem further.
Like she and I were just saying that with those, they can be one day your pumpkin or squash
It's
looks great.
beautiful.
Second day, it's drooping, it looks like it's about
So I
one day
think-
from the grave.
If you try something like one of those row covers and you can buy yourself some time, and then when you see the blossoms coming, you've got to take that off. But I did that, and I got a little time, I got more squash before it hit, because I covered all the baby plants until they started blooming, and then took it off, and I got more of a, like I said, more of a harvest from it. Because zucchini, after a while, you kind of wish those things would come again. It's like, okay, I've had enough. Yeah. I brought marigold plants. They're a part of IPM also. I did a little research on them. I've always planted them around my tomatoes because I knew they helped with some nematodes that tomatoes have problems with. But I looked up, and of course, as with any flowering plant, they're going to attract beneficials. And they do repel mosquitoes. And they say tomato worms. I'm not sure that they mean those great big ones. The one thing that they did caution is, they said you can plant them throughout your vegetable garden, but don't plant them near beans. Beans do not like marigolds. So, as you can see, I don't know if you all remember a couple years ago, we made these little things out of toilet paper tubes. That's how I start my plants. And I did bring cups so you could carry them neatly. So you each can take a cup with, I think they each have 2 marigolds, but you have to be, well, they're still babies enough, you might be able to split them. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
You had a picture in the beginning of a rabbit. Now, I have a garden, a yard full of rabbits. Does anybody like to eat rabbits? Come and hunt in my yard. But anyway, the only thing I can do is fence, and it has to be chicken wire. Last year, they ate right through my plastic fences.
Oh, yeah, plastic won't do it.
Yeah, they just ate all kinds of holes. So I put up a really wonderful fence around my garden. But I have things planted in other spots in my yard, and they just want to eat everything. They like marigolds, they like roses. They'll just Is there, now I've tried cayenne pepper. That seems to help.
Try a little bit of fish emulsion and see if that does anything.
I tried that liquid fence,
Mhm.
and I think my rabbits come up and see that and say, oh, she put on salad dressing.
Yeah.
So, and then that's expensive, and you have to keep reapplying it.
Right.
So,
Right.
anybody have any
Fencing, I
idea?
think, is the only option. And you have to make sure that the openings are small enough, because we put some rabbit fence on there around our garden, and it was really close to the bottom, and this smart aleck rabbit got up and went through the top where it was a little bit bigger, but it wasn't that much bigger. but it was a little rabbit, and it's like, how did that rabbit get in there? Oh yeah, don't chain link fence, forget that. We've watched rabbits go through chain link fence. Does anybody have trouble with the gophers getting into their gardens?
Moles and gophers all over the yard.
Well, remember there's, I don't know if you all have trouble with voles, but remember they're different, and the way to remember them is mole, M, it's a meat eater. Vole, V, it's a vegetable eater. So a vole will go after your roots of your plants. I've had them take out a whole little rose bed because they just make the roots like this, you know, they just eat them off. And they will use the mole tunnels, but they don't really tunnel themselves. But the moles are after the grubs, and they'll eat earthworms and stuff like that in your lawn. So that's how you keep the two separate. Voles kind of, I had a picture of a vole, but I think I took him off. They kind of look like short-eared mice.
Very
Traps.
Voles, well, you're supposed to be able to scare them, repel them, moles and voles, with a product that has castor oil in it. That's supposed to be a good IPM product. So you're not really killing them, you're just getting them out of there.
The gophers, what I do is take juicy fruit gum, remove the paper, and stick that into the ground. They cannot digest it, so they die of a bowel obstruction or something else. So he said to me, "Oh, I don't know if I like that too much." I said, "Let's put the where
Yeah.
and they do go away. All of a sudden, you don't have.
That's regular gophers?
Mhm. Well,
The
somebody at the gas
ground-
station by
the ground-
Dave told me that he has the bigger ones. Like, it looks like that one,
Yeah.
it's that. And he put several of them in there.
These are flicker tails, and then the little stripy ones are actually ground squirrels. but they're-
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what we
And
have.
both of them do work. It does work for mine. As soon as I see the whole,
Now, if you have a deer, that's a different problem, because you gotta have really long, high fences. Mhm.
With gophers, I put citronella and peppermint on cotton balls and put that down the holes, not covered.
and then you cover it.
Mhm.
I don't even cover it. It just goes away. They just go away. I don't know what, if they died down there. I don't care. The opposite word is they go away.
Okay.
We get the cap, and then we pour water down the hole, and the gopher comes
Oh.
out.
You have a what?
A dachshund.
Yeah.
Good for him, good for him.
Yes.
Last year I had a couple of tomato plants that I had planted in like a raised bed type, but it was in a barrel type thing. And I couldn't figure out what was on those tomatoes or whatever. And I told my sister about it, and they look just like cat eyes. And I went online and looked up, she said, look online, there's something like cat eye tomato disease.
Oh.
Has anybody ever had my other tomato plants? These were a couple of them that I bought later. I can't remember if it was on Mars or wherever, but that's usually where I
Is
buy
that one virus?
I don't know. I mean, my other tomatoes didn't
See.
have, these were a couple of late ones that I bought.
I
Didn't
didn't,
say what to do about them, Dorothea.
No, I don't even remember anymore. I got rid of the whole, I mean, there were still tomatoes that you could use on, they were still tomatoes, but they were just like cat eyes.
My little neighbor boy had the worst little raccoons. And they would come up to the tomato plant and.
it didn't look like that, did it?
Three-fourths of it
No,
Okay.
that doesn't look like cat eye.
Yeah.
These look cat eyes on the internet.
Oh, okay. I'll have to do that.
Cat eye tomatoes, and I don't remember exactly.
I didn't know that was something that we had.
I've never,
Hmm.
and you couldn't use any of them. I mean, I got rid of all of that stuff, and I got beets planted in there.
Okay, Marlis, I have a question for you. I know one of these blights is the same blight that affected the potato famine, but I can't remember if it was early or the late. The late. And that's that blight affects the staying ability of your tomatoes. So, before I had this, I was always used to, you pick tomatoes and you'd let them kind of sit on the counter until you have enough to run a canner full. Well, they don't keep. And that's what happened with the potato famine in Ireland, is the potatoes didn't keep. They would spoil. So, you expect potatoes to keep in your root cellar over the winter so you have something to eat, but if they had this blight, they didn't keep.
They just look it up.
I did. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
I'm coming up with cat facing.
Yeah, cat facing.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. Physiological disorder of tomatoes has not been extensively researched, not fully understood. Causes, cold temperature during flowering increases the incidence. Under some conditions, pruning and high nitrogen levels can increase incidence. And damage from thrips to the flower. Thrips.
what are thrips?
There are
Thrips.
tiny, THRIPS, a tiny little skinny insect.
It looks like, if you see them in a flower, they look like a little pencil mark running around inside your flower. And they make little, on the flowers, they make little, you would see them in peonies. They make little brown marks where they feed, because they have like one of us, a rasping mouth part. They're really bad on roses, but all you have to, if you have peonies, if you open up the peony and you see little pencil marks about maybe 1/8 of an inch long running around, that's a thrip. And they usually come in when the farmers are harvesting their grain, because otherwise they hang out in wheat fields, grain fields.
It says heirloom varieties tend to be more prone.
So
I guess I don't remember where
Facing.
cat facing or cat eye.
Okay.
But when you looked at it, I don't think I got any of them that were right because they spoiled right up. But you looked at them and I said, they look like cat eyes. I mean, just, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for your attention. And
Good job.